For fun, a millionaire invited a waitress and her son to his birthday party on the day of the James L. stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse, surveying the glittering cityscape below. At 35, he was the epitome of success, a self-made millionaire with a portfolio that spanned real estate, tech startups, and high-end restaurants. His life was a testament to the American dream, a rags-to-riches story that gossip columns couldn't get enough of. Born into a working-class family, James had clawed his way to the top through sheer determination and a knack for spotting opportunities. He remembered the days when he shared a cramped apartment with his parents and younger brother, Tommy. Those memories seemed like a lifetime ago, faded and distant like an old photograph. Now James's world was one of luxury and excess. His closet was filled with tailored suits that cost more than what most people earned in a month. His garage housed a collection of sports cars that would make any automobile enthusiast green with envy. Every surface in his home gleamed with the shine of success, from the marble countertops in the kitchen to the crystal chandeliers that adorned the ceilings. James ran a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair, a small smile playing on his lips. Tonight was his annual birthday bash, an event that had become legendary in the city's social circles. It was a night when the who's who of the business and entertainment world would gather to celebrate him, to bask in the glow of his success and perhaps to curry favor with the man who seemed to have the Midas touch. As he adjusted his platinum cufflinks, a gift from a grateful investor, James thought about the guest list for the evening. CEOs, celebrities, politicians, they would all be there, raising a glass in his honor. It was a far cry from the birthday parties of his youth, where a homemade cake and a few close friends were the highlights. The sound of his phone ringing pulled James from his reverie. It was his event planner confirming the last-minute details for the party. "Yes, make sure the champagne is flowing all night," he instructed, his voice carrying the authoritative tone of a man used to giving orders. "And the gift bags for the guests, they're ready, right? Good." As he ended the call, James caught sight of his reflection in the window. He looked every inch the successful businessman, from his designer watch to his Italian leather shoes. But there was something in his eyes, a hint of emptiness that even he couldn't ignore. For a moment, James allowed himself to wonder if all of this, the wealth, the parties, the adoration, was truly fulfilling. But he quickly pushed the thought aside. This was the life he had always dreamed of, the life he had sacrificed everything for, and tonight he would celebrate it in style. And with one last glance at the city below, James turned away from the window. It was time to get ready for the party. As he walked towards his bedroom, his steps echoed in the vast, empty penthouse. Despite the impending arrival of hundreds of guests, James couldn't shake off the feeling of profound loneliness that seemed to permeate every corner of his luxurious home. Little did James know that this birthday would mark the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything he thought he knew about success, happiness, and the true meaning of wealth. As the sun set over the city, casting long shadows across his opulent domain, James L. prepared to face a night that would change his life forever. In a stark contrast to James's world of opulence, across town in a cramped one-bedroom apartment, Charlotte Davies hummed softly as she prepared dinner. The melody, a haunting tune from a classical piece she once played, filled the small space, momentarily masking the sound of passing traffic and the constant hum of the aging refrigerator. At 28, Charlotte's face bore the lines of someone who had weathered more storms than her years suggested. Her hands, once destined for concert halls, now bore the calluses of a waitress who worked double shifts to make ends meet. Yet there was a quiet strength in her movements, a resilience that spoke of a spirit unbroken by hardship. "Caleb, honey, dinner's almost ready," she called out, her voice carrying a warmth that seemed to brighten the drab walls of their modest home. 6-year-old Caleb emerged from the corner of the living room that doubled as his bedroom, his small fingers still moving in the air, mimicking the act of playing piano keys. "Mom, I almost got it. That new piece you showed me, I can feel it." Charlotte's heart swelled with pride and a tinge of sadness. Her son had inherited her passion for music, along with a talent that surpassed her own at his age. But unlike the shiny grand piano of her childhood, Caleb's instrument was a tattered keyboard with several non-functioning keys, a find from a yard sale that had been both a blessing and a painful reminder of their circumstances. As they sat down to their modest meal of pasta and vegetables, Charlotte couldn't help but notice how Caleb's eyes lit up when he talked about music. It was the same light she once saw in her own reflection, before life had taken unexpected turns. "Mom, do you think I'll ever play on a real piano?" Caleb asked, his fork pausing midway to his mouth. Charlotte felt a lump form in her throat. "Of course, sweetie. One day you'll play on the biggest, grandest piano in the Peychaus Cope, I promise." As she spoke the words, Charlotte silently prayed they would come true. She knew all too well the cruel twists fate could take. Once a promising pianist herself, Charlotte had been on the cusp of a scholarship to a prestigious music school when her parents' sudden death left her responsible for her younger siblings. Dreams of concert halls were replaced by the reality of waiting tables and night school. After dinner, as Charlotte washed the dishes, she watched Caleb return to his makeshift piano. His small fingers danced over the silent keys of the broken instrument, his imagination filling in the missing notes. The sight brought tears to her eyes, a mixture of joy at his passion and heartache at their limitations. Later that night, after tucking Caleb into bed, Charlotte sat at their small kitchen table, poring over bills by the light of a single lamp. The stack of overdue notices seemed to grow taller each month, a tower of paper threatening to topple their precarious financial balance. She picked up a flyer for a local music competition, the prize money tempting her. It could pay for a real piano, maybe even some proper lessons for Caleb, but the entry fee. Charlotte sighed, running a hand through her hair. She had long ago learned that dreams came with a price tag, one that often seemed just out of reach. As she prepared for bed, exhausted from another long day, Charlotte paused by the keyboard. Her fingers ghosted over the keys, muscle memory recalling melodies from a life that seemed increasingly distant. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine a different life, one where she and Caleb could pursue their passion without the constant worry of survival. But the sound of the siren outside jolted her back to reality. Tomorrow would be another day of serving others, of plastering on a smile, while her dreams simmered just below the surface. But as she glanced at Caleb's sleeping form, Charlotte felt a renewed determination. For him, she would keep pushing, keep dreaming, because in his music she saw a future brighter than their present circumstances could dim. The grand estate was a vision of elegance and romance, its sprawling grounds transformed into a fairy tale setting for what was touted as the wedding of the year. White roses and delicate orchids adorned every surface, their fragrance mingling with the excitement in the air. Soft classical music drifted through the flower-lined corridors, setting the perfect ambience for the union of James L. and Hannah Edwards. James stood at the altar, his usually confident demeanor replaced by a nervous energy that was both endearing and palpable. His custom-tailored tuxedo fit him perfectly, but he tugged at his collar, feeling a mix of anticipation and disbelief. He, James L., the man who could close million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, was about to embark on the most important merger of his life. As the wedding march began, all eyes turned to the entrance. Hannah appeared, a vision in white, her dress a masterpiece of lace and silk that seemed to float around her as she moved. James felt his breath catch in his throat. In that moment, all his achievements, all his wealth, paled in comparison to the beauty walking towards him. "She is the embodiment of everything I've ever dreamed of," James thought, his eyes shining with each step Hannah took. The gentle breeze stirred the ribbons and flowers decorating the outdoor setting, as if nature itself was celebrating their union. When Hannah reached the altar, she took James's hands in hers. Their eyes met, conveying a silent promise of a shared future filled with love and support. "You are my dream come true, James," Hannah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Ever since I heard the Song of the Soul, I knew it would be the theme of the day I united with you." The Song of the Soul, a hauntingly beautiful piece they had chosen together, began to play. Its melody seemed to perfectly capture the essence of their journey together, every note a testament to their love story. As they exchanged vows, the gathering of guests, a who's who of high society and business elites, watched with rapt attention. But for James and Hannah, the world had narrowed to just the two of them, lost in the promise of their future together. After the ceremony, the celebration began in earnest. The reception was a lavish affair, with gourmet food, champagne, and music that kept the dance floor packed. James and Hannah moved among their guests, accepting congratulations and well wishes, their happiness infectious. In a quiet moment, James pulled Hannah close on the dance floor. "I never thought I could feel this happy," he confessed, his usual bravado replaced by genuine vulnerability. "You make me want to be a better man, Hannah." Hannah's eyes sparkled as she looked up at him. "And you, James L., make me believe that fairy tales can come true. Promise me we'll always face life together, no matter what comes our way." "Until death do us part," James vowed, sealing his promise with a kiss that drew applause from their watching guests. As the night wore on, the newlyweds found themselves by the estate's grand piano. Hannah, an accomplished pianist herself, sat down and began to play. The melodic notes of the Song of the Soul filled the air once more, and James watched in awe as his bride's fingers danced across the keys. The guests gathered around, mesmerized by the impromptu performance. James felt a surge of pride and love. This was the woman who had chosen to share her life with him, who saw beyond his wealth and status to the man he truly was. When Hannah finished playing, she looked up at James with eyes full of love and promise. "This is just the beginning of our symphony together," she said softly. As the reception came to a close and guests began to depart, James and Hannah stood hand in hand, watching the last of the fireworks illuminate the night sky. The estate, which had witnessed countless social events and business gatherings, had never seen a celebration quite like this, a true union of hearts. Little did they know that this blissful day would become a cherished memory, one that James would cling to in the dark days to come. For now, as they retreated to the bridal suite, their hearts were full of hope and dreams for a future that seemed as bright and sparkling as the stars above. The years following their wedding were a whirlwind of happiness and success for James and Hannah. Their love seemed to grow stronger with each passing day, and James's business empire continued to expand. They were the golden couple, admired and envied in equal measure. But fate had a cruel twist in store, one that would shatter their perfect world and send James spiraling into a darkness he never imagined possible. It began with subtle changes. Hannah, always vibrant and full of life, started to tire more easily. At first they dismissed it as stress from their busy lives, but as weeks turned into months, the symptoms became impossible to ignore. Pale skin, unexplained bruises, and a persistent fatigue that seemed to drain the light from her eyes. The diagnosis, when it came, was devastating. A rare and aggressive form of leukemia had taken root in Hannah's body, spreading silently and swiftly. The prognosis was grim, with doctors giving her mere months to live. James, the man who always had a solution, who could buy his way out of any problem, found himself utterly helpless. He spared no expense, flying in specialists from around the world, exploring experimental treatments, and even considering unconventional therapies. But as Hannah's condition deteriorated, he was forced to confront the bitter truth. There are some things money can't buy. The once bustling mansion became a quiet, somber place. The grand piano in the living room, where Hannah used to play their favorite melodies, stood silent and untouched. James spent every moment he could by Hannah's bedside, holding her hand, reading to her, or simply sharing the silence that stretched between them. "James," Hannah whispered one evening, her voice weak, but her eyes still full of love. "Promise me you'll keep living after I'm gone. Don't let my death be the end of you too." James felt his heart breaking all over again. "How can I live without you, Hannah? You're my everything." She squeezed his hand with what little strength she had left. "I'll always be with you, in every beautiful thing you see, in every kind act you do. You don't forget the man I fell in love with." As Hannah's final days approached, James became increasingly withdrawn from the outside world. Business calls went unanswered, meetings were cancelled, and important decisions were left unmade. His entire focus was on spending every precious moment with his dying wife. On a quiet autumn evening, with the setting sun casting a golden glow through the bedroom window, Hannah took her last breath. James, holding her hand, felt a part of himself die along with her. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by his anguished sobs. In the days and weeks that followed Hannah's passing, James was a shell of his former self. He moved through the funeral arrangements in a daze, barely registering the condolences from friends and business associates. The grand send-off, befitting the wife of one of the city's most prominent businessmen, felt hollow and meaningless to him. As the initial shock of loss began to fade, it was replaced by a deep, all-consuming anger. James raged against the unfairness of it all, against a world that would take Hannah from him. He lashed out at those around him, pushing away friends and colleagues who tried to offer support. Slowly but surely, James began to seek solace in the bottom of a bottle. The man who once sipped fine wines at high-class events now found himself drinking cheap whiskey straight from the bottle, alone in his vast, empty mansion. Nights blurred into days as he lost himself in an alcohol-induced haze, trying desperately to numb the pain of his loss. His business empire, once meticulously managed, began to show cracks. Important meetings were missed, deals fell through, and his once sharp business acumen dulled under the influence of grief and alcohol. So concerned board members and partners tried to intervene, but James pushed them all away, accusing them of trying to take advantage of his vulnerable state. The media, which had once celebrated James and Hannah as the perfect couple, now ran stories of his downfall. Paparazzi camped outside his home, hoping to catch a glimpse of the fallen tycoon. Rumors swirled about his mental state, his drinking problem, and the rapid decline of his business interests. In his darkest moments, James found himself sitting at Hannah's piano, his clumsy, drink-numbed fingers trying to recreate the melodies she once played. The song of the soul, once a symbol of their love, now haunted him, a painful reminder of all he had lost. As months passed, James's appearance began to reflect his inner turmoil. The once impeccably groomed businessman now sported unkempt hair and a scruffy beard. Designer suits were replaced by rumpled clothes that reeked of alcohol and neglect. James L., once the epitome of success and happiness, had become a cautionary tale, a reminder of how quickly one can fall from grace. Little did he know that his path to redemption would begin in the most unexpected way, with an invitation extended on a whim to a struggling waitress and her musically gifted son. The grand mansion that had once been the epicenter of high society gatherings now stood as a silent testament to James's decline. Its manicured lawns were overgrown, the fountains dry, and an air of neglect hung over the once pristine estate. Yet, as James's birthday approached, a spark of his old self flickered to life, fueled by a desperate need to recapture some semblance of his former glory. In a moment of alcohol-induced nostalgia, James decided to throw one last lavish party. The guest list, once a carefully curated selection of the city's elite, was now a hodgepodge of whoever would still answer his calls. Many of his former friends and associates had distanced themselves, wary of being associated with his downward spiral. But James, in his inebriated state, barely noticed the difference. On the day of the party, James found himself in a high-end restaurant, nursing a drink at the bar. It was early afternoon, but time had lost all meaning to him. As he gazed absently around the nearly empty establishment, his eyes fell on a waitress clearing a nearby table. Something about her caught his attention, a grace in her movements, perhaps, or a hint of hidden strength in her tired eyes. "You," James called out, his voice rough from disuse and too much whiskey. "What's your name?" The waitress looked up, startled. "Charlotte, sir," she replied cautiously, sensing the unpredictability of the disheveled man before her. James studied her for a moment, his alcohol-addled mind trying to place why she seemed vaguely familiar. "Charlotte," he repeated, rolling the name around on his tongue. "You look like someone who could use a good party. How'd you like to come to my birthday celebration tonight?" Charlotte blinked in surprise, unsure how to respond to this unexpected proposition from a clearly troubled stranger. I'm flattered, sir, but I have my son to look after and—" "To bring him along," James interrupted with a dismissive wave of his hand. "The more, the merrier. It'll be good for the boy to see how the other half lives." He chuckled darkly at his own joke. Charlotte hesitated, torn between polite refusal and an inexplicable curiosity about this man and his world. Before she could respond, James pulled out a business card and scribbled an address on the back. "Here," he said, sliding the card across the bar. "Come or don't come, it's all the same to me, but it might be the most interesting thing that happens to you this year." With that, James stood up unsteadily, threw some crumpled bills on the bar, and staggered out of the restaurant, leaving a bewildered Charlotte staring after him. That evening, as Charlotte finished her shift, she found herself staring at the card James had given her. The address belonged to one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the city. She thought of Caleb, waiting at home with a neighbor, probably practicing on his worn-out keyboard. A wild idea began to form in her mind. Maybe, she thought, just maybe this could be an opportunity for Caleb to see a real piano, to play on keys that all work. It was a foolish notion, she knew. Attending a stranger's party, especially one who seemed as unstable as James, was risky at best. But the thought of giving Caleb even a glimpse of the world he dreamed about was too tempting to resist. With a mix of trepidation and excitement, Charlotte made her decision. She picked up Caleb from the neighbors, explaining their unusual evening plans as they rushed home to change into their best clothes, which in their case meant Caleb's school uniform and Charlotte's one nice dress, a relic from happier times. As they approached the mansion in a taxi they could ill afford, Caleb's eyes widened in wonder. "Mom, look at how big it is," he exclaimed, pressing his face against the window. "Do you think they have a piano?" Charlotte squeezed his hand, hoping she hadn't made a terrible mistake. "I'm sure they do, sweetie, but remember, we're just guests. We need to be on our best behavior." They were greeted at the door by a visibly uncomfortable butler who seemed unsure whether to welcome them or turn them away. To the sound of muted music and conversation drifted from within the house. As they stepped into the grand foyer, Charlotte and Caleb found themselves in a world that seemed plucked from the pages of a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow over marble floors, and priceless artworks adorned the walls. But there was also an undercurrent of decay, wilted flowers in expensive vases, dust gathering in corners, and a faint smell of neglect that even the strongest perfumes couldn't quite mask. The party guests, far fewer in number than James had hoped, milled about with drinks in hand. Many cast curious, sometimes disdainful, glances at Charlotte and Caleb, clearly out of place in this opulent setting. Suddenly James appeared before them, swaying slightly and clutching a half-empty glass. "You came," he exclaimed, his voice too loud in the cavernous space. "Charlotte, wasn't it? And this must be your boy. Welcome to my humble abode." Charlotte nodded, acutely aware of the stares they were attracting. "Thank you for inviting us, Mr. L. It's very generous of you." James waved off her thanks with a flourish that nearly cost him his balance. "Nonsense. It's my birthday, and I'll invite who I damn well please." "Now, young man," he said, turning his attention to Caleb, "what do you think of all this?" Caleb, wide-eyed but unintimidated, looked up at James. "It's amazing, sir. But do you have a piano?" James blinked, caught off guard by the question. For a moment the fog of alcohol seemed to clear from his eyes, replaced by a flash of pain so raw it made Charlotte's heart ache. "A piano," James repeated softly. "Yes, we have a piano. Anna's piano." He seemed lost in thought for a moment before shaking himself back to the present. "Come, I'll show you. It's about time someone played the damn thing again." As James led them deeper into the house, Charlotte couldn't shake the feeling that they had stepped into something far more complex than a simple birthday party. Little did she know that this impulsive invitation would set in motion a chain of events that would change all their lives forever. The grand piano stood in a corner of the spacious living room, its polished surface reflecting the soft light of the crystal chandelier above. As James led Charlotte and Caleb towards it, a hush fell over the nearby guests, curious about the newcomers who had caught their host's attention. Caleb's eyes widened as he approached the instrument, It was far grander than anything he had ever seen, let alone played. His small hand reached out, almost reverently, to touch the gleaming keys. "Go on, boy," James said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "Show us what you can do." Charlotte, sensing the weight of the moment, knelt beside Caleb. "Remember what we practiced at home? Sweet home," she whispered encouragingly. "Just imagine you're in our living room." Caleb nodded, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first notes of the Song of the Soul filled the air, hesitant at first but growing in confidence with each measure. The party guests turned, surprised by the unexpected performance. As the melody unfolded, something remarkable happened. Caleb's natural talent, nurtured by Charlotte's patient teaching, blossomed on the superior instrument. The song, played on a piano where all the keys worked in perfect harmony, took on a life of its own. Charlotte, overcome with emotion at hearing her son play on a real piano for the first time, joined in, her voice blending seamlessly with the music. Together, mother and son created a performance that was both technically impressive and deeply moving. James stood frozen, the glass in his hand forgotten. The Song of the Soul, Hannah's favorite piece, the melody that had been played at their wedding, now filled his home once again. But instead of bringing pain, as it had for so long, the music seemed to awaken something long dormant within him. As Charlotte and Caleb's impromptu performance continued, the atmosphere in the room transformed. Conversations ceased, replaced by an attentive silence. Even the most jaded of the party-goers found themselves captivated by the unexpected display of raw talent and emotion. Among the guests, Noah Shen, a music producer and one of James's oldest friends, listened with growing excitement. His trained ear recognized not just talent, but something truly special in the performance unfolding before him. As the final notes faded away, there was a moment of stunned silence before the room erupted in applause. Caleb, flushed with excitement, turned to his mother with a beaming smile. Charlotte hugged him tightly, tears of joy and pride streaming down her face. The spell broken, James stumbled forward, his face a storm of conflicting emotions. "How dare you?" he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "Who gave you permission to play that song?" The room fell silent once more, the tension palpable. Charlotte stood protectively in front of Caleb, her earlier joy replaced by fear and confusion. "I'm sorry, Mr. L," she began. "We didn't mean any offense." "Offense?" James's voice rose, fueled by grief and alcohol. "That was my wife's song." "Our song? And you dare to come into my home and—" James, Noah's calm voice cut through the tension as he stepped forward. "That's enough." James whirled to face his friend, his eyes blazing. "Stay out of this, Noah. This is my house, my party, and these people have no right." Noah placed a firm hand on James's shoulder. "Listen to yourself, old friend. Can't you see what just happened here?" That was beautiful. It was a gift. James's anger seemed to deflate slightly, replaced by confusion and a hint of the pain he'd been trying to drown for so long. "A gift? Noah, you don't understand that song." "I know what that song means to you," Noah said gently. "But James, music is meant to be shared, to heal. What we just witnessed, it wasn't a desecration of Hannah's memory. It was a celebration of it." As Noah spoke, other guests murmured in agreement. The performance had touched something in all of them, reminding them of the James they used to know, the man who loved music and life with equal passion. Charlotte, still shielding Caleb, found her voice. "Mr. L, we truly didn't mean to upset you. The Song of the Soul, it's always been special to us too. My mother taught it to me and I've been teaching Caleb. We didn't know." James looked at Charlotte, really seeing her for the first time. In her eyes he saw not pity or judgment, but a reflection of his own pain and love for music. His gaze shifted to Caleb, who looked up at him with a mixture of fear and hope. You play just like she did," James said softly, his anger giving way to a deep, aching sadness. "Where did you learn to play like that, boy?" Caleb, encouraged by his mother's gentle nudge, answered, "Mom teaches me, sir. We have an old keyboard at home, but some keys don't work. I've never played on a real piano before. It's beautiful." James felt something crack inside him. The wall of anger and bitterness he had built around his heart began to crumble. He looked around the room at the faces of his guests, some concerned, some curious, but all waiting to see how he would react. Noah, sensing the shift in his friend, pressed his advantage. "James, why don't we all take a moment to appreciate what we've just experienced? Charlotte, Caleb, would you be willing to play something else for us?" Charlotte hesitated, looking to James for permission. After a long moment, James gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Play," he said, his voice hoarse. "Please, play something else." As Charlotte and Caleb returned to the piano, James sank into a nearby chair, the fight gone out of him. Noah sat beside him, a comforting presence as the music began again. This time, Charlotte and Caleb chose a lighter piece, a melody full of hope and joy. As they played, James felt tears he had long held back begin to fall. Each note seemed to chip away at the hardness that had encased his heart since Hannah's death. Noah watched his friend closely, recognizing the internal struggle playing out. When he was sure James wouldn't object, he turned to the other guests. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced quietly, "I think we've all witnessed something extraordinary tonight. With your permission, James, I'd like to speak with Charlotte and Caleb after their performance. I believe there's an opportunity here that we shouldn't ignore." James, lost in the music and memories, simply nodded. He was transported back to happier times, evenings spent with Hannah at the piano, their laughter and love filling the house with warmth. As the second song came to an end, the applause was genuine and enthusiastic. Charlotte and Caleb, overwhelmed by the response, bowed awkwardly, unused to such attention. Noah stood, addressing the room. "I think we can all agree that this has been a most unexpected and delightful addition to the evening. Now, if you'll excuse us, I believe James needs a moment. Please enjoy the rest of the party." As the guests dispersed, murmuring excitedly about what they had witnessed, Noah helped James to his feet. "Come on, old friend. Let's get some air. And then if you're willing, I think we need to have a serious talk about the future, yours and perhaps theirs too." James allowed himself to be led away, casting one last look at Charlotte and Caleb. For the first time in years, a small spark of something like hope flickered in his eyes. The night had taken an unexpected turn, setting the stage for changes none of them could have anticipated. As the party wound down, Noah led Charlotte and Caleb to a quiet study, away from the curious eyes of the remaining guests. James, still shaken by the evening's events, followed silently, his usual bravado replaced by a contemplative stillness. "Please sit down." Noah gestured to a plush leather sofa. Charlotte and Caleb perched on the edge, clearly out of their element in the opulent surroundings. Noah took a seat across from them, leaning forward with an intensity that spoke of barely contained excitement. "What you two did out there," he began, his eyes shining, "was nothing short of extraordinary. I've been in the music industry for over 2 decades, and I can count on one hand the number of times I've been as moved as I was tonight." Charlotte blushed, instinctively pulling Caleb closer. "Thank you, Mr. Chen. We just love music, that's all." Noah shook his head, a small smile playing on his lips. "It's more than that, Charlotte. What you and Caleb have, it's rare, it's special, and I believe it deserves to be heard by a much wider audience." James, who had been standing by the window, turned at these words. "Noah, what are you saying?" Noah met his friend's gaze steadily. "I'm saying, James, that I want to invest in Charlotte and Caleb's talent. I want to produce their music, to give them the platform they deserve." The room fell silent as the weight of Noah's words sank in. Caleb looked up at his mother, eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. Charlotte, for her part, seemed frozen in disbelief. "Mr. Chen," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. That's very kind of you, but we couldn't possibly, we're not professionals. Caleb is just a child and I." Noah held up a hand, his expression gentle but determined. "Charlotte, talent like yours doesn't come along every day. Yes, there's work to be done, skills to be honed, but the raw material, it's there, and it's exceptional." He turned to Caleb, his tone softening further. "Caleb, how would you like to play on a real piano whenever you want, to learn from the best teachers in the city?" Caleb's face lit up, but he looked to his mother for guidance. Charlotte swallowed hard, clearly torn between the opportunity being presented and the realities of their life. "Mr. Chen, it's overwhelming. But our situation, it's complicated. I have responsibilities, bills to pay, and Caleb's education." James, who had been listening silently, suddenly spoke up. "No, a word," he gestured for his friend to join him by the window. In hushed tones, the two men conferred, with James occasionally casting glances at Charlotte and Caleb. After what seemed like an eternity, they returned to the center of the room. James, looking more clear-eyed than he had in months, addressed Charlotte directly. "Miss Davies," he began, his tone formal but not unkind. "I owe you and your son an apology. My behavior earlier was inexcusable. But more than that, I realize now that I've been given a chance to make amends, to do something meaningful." He took a deep breath before continuing. "I'd like to offer you a position here at the estate. We need someone to manage the household, to bring some life back into this place. The job comes with living quarters for you and Caleb." And he glanced at Noah, who nodded encouragingly, "and it would allow you the flexibility to pursue this opportunity with Noah." Charlotte gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Mr. L, I don't know what to say. This is all happening so fast." Noah leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Charlotte, I know this is a lot to take in, but please consider it. We're not asking you to change who you are or to abandon your values. We're offering you and Caleb a chance to share your gift with the world on your own terms." Caleb, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. "Mom, can we, please? I promise I'll still do all my schoolwork and help around the house. I just want to play music, real music, on a real piano." Charlotte looked at her son, tears welling in her eyes. She saw in his face the same passion, the same dream that had once burned in her own heart. With a deep breath, she turned back to Noah and James. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion, "if you're serious about this offer, if you're willing to be patient with us as we navigate this new world, then yes, we accept." The room seemed to collectively exhale. Noah beamed, already mentally planning recording sessions and performances. James nodded, a small smile, the first genuine one in years, tugging at the corners of his mouth. As they began to discuss the details, the first light of dawn crept through the windows. It was a new day in more ways than one. For Charlotte and Caleb, it was the beginning of a journey they had never dared to dream of. For James, it was a tentative step back towards the man he used to be, guided by the healing power of music and the unexpected gift of second chances. Despite the glimmer of hope that Charlotte and Caleb's arrival had brought to the mansion, James's demons were not so easily vanquished. The morning after the party, he woke with a pounding headache and a familiar sense of emptiness. The brief moment of connection he had felt during the music faded, replaced by the gnawing pain of his loss. As Charlotte and Caleb settled into their new roles in the household, James retreated further into himself. The sight of them, their obvious love for each other and their shared passion for music, was a constant reminder of what he had lost with Anna. Instead of embracing the chance for change, James found himself resenting their presence. His drinking, which had already been problematic, spiraled out of control. James would disappear for days at a time, holed up in high-end hotels or exclusive clubs, drowning his sorrows in expensive liquor. When he did return to the mansion, he was often belligerent and unpredictable, his mood swinging wildly between maudlin sentimentality and bitter anger. Charlotte did her best to shield Caleb from the worst of James's behavior, but it was impossible to hide the reality of their benefactor's decline. She would often find James passed out in his study, surrounded by empty bottles and crumpled papers, failed attempts to recapture his former business acumen. "Mr. L," she would say gently, trying to rouse him, "please let me help you to bed." But James would brush her off, muttering, "Leave me alone. You don't understand. None of you understand." As his alcohol consumption increased, so did his reckless spending. James seemed determined to burn through his fortune as quickly as possible. He bought luxury cars on a whim, only to abandon them in the garage after a single drive. Expensive artwork was purchased and then left uncrated, gathering dust in forgotten corners of the mansion. One particularly alarming incident occurred when James, in a drunken stupor, decided to bid on a private island. It was only Noah's timely intervention that prevented the sale from going through, potentially saving James from financial ruin. "James, this has to stop," Noah pleaded after cancelling the island purchase. "You're throwing everything away. Think about Hannah. Is this what she would have wanted for you?" But James was beyond reason. "Don't you dare speak her name," he roared, hurling a crystal tumbler against the wall. "She's gone, Noah, gone, and all of this, it means nothing without her." The erratic behavior began to take its toll on James's business empire. Board members, once loyal to a fault, started to distance themselves. Investors grew wary, and deals that would have once been routine fell through due to James's unreliability and increasingly volatile reputation. Charlotte, witnessing this downward spiral, felt torn between gratitude for the opportunity James had given her and Caleb, and a growing concern for the man himself. She tried to reach out to offer support, but James rebuffed her at every turn. "I don't need your pity," he would snarl, the stench of alcohol heavy on his breath. "Just do your job and leave me be." Caleb, with the innocence of youth, couldn't understand the change in the man who had welcomed them into his home. "Mom," he would ask, his voice small, "why is Mr. L so sad all the time? Can't we help him?" Charlotte would pull her son close, her heart heavy. "Sometimes, sweetheart, people carry pain so deep that it's hard for them to let others in. All we can do is be here, be kind, and hope that one day Mr. L will be ready to heal." As months passed, the mansion began to reflect James's inner turmoil. Once immaculate rooms fell into disrepair as James fired staff members in fits of paranoia or simply forgot to pay them. The gardens, once Hannah's pride and joy, became overgrown and wild. Noah watched his friends decline with growing alarm. He knew that intervention was necessary, but every attempt to reason with Dries was met with hostility or indifference. The James he had known, brilliant, charismatic, full of life, seemed to be slipping away, replaced by a bitter shell of a man intent on self-destruction. Little did any of them know that rock bottom was still to come, and that it would take an even greater shock to jolt James out of his downward spiral. The stage was set for a confrontation that would either be the final nail in James's coffin or the spark that would reignite his will to live. Just as Charlotte and Caleb were beginning to settle into their new life at the mansion, a shadow from the past emerged, threatening to unravel everything. On a crisp autumn morning, as Charlotte was overseeing the delivery of groceries, a sleek car pulled up the driveway. A man stepped out, his designer suit and confident stride at odds with the neglected surroundings of the estate. Charlotte froze, her heart pounding as recognition dawned. "Marcus," she whispered, the name tasting bitter on her tongue. Marcus Reeves, Caleb's biological father, strode towards her with a predatory smile. "Hello, Charlotte. Long time no see. You're looking well." His eyes raked over her, taking in the simple but well-made clothes that had replaced her waitress uniform. "What are you doing here, Marcus?" Charlotte asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. "How did you find us?" Marcus chuckled, the sound devoid of warmth. "Oh, come now. Did you really think you could hide forever? Especially now that you're rubbing elbows with the elite." He gestured at the mansion behind her. "I must say you've done well for yourself. And for my son." The emphasis on my sent a chill down Charlotte's spine. "Caleb is not your son," she hissed. "You made that clear when you walked out on us 6 years ago." "People change, Charlotte," Marcus said, his tone suddenly serious. "I've changed. I want to be a part of Caleb's life. I have rights, you know." Before Charlotte could respond, the front door burst open and Caleb came bounding out, his face lit up with excitement. Noah says we can start recording next week," and he stopped short, noticing the stranger. "Who's that, Mom?" "Yum?" Marcus's eyes widened as he took in the sight of Caleb. "My God, he looks just like me at that age," he murmured. Charlotte quickly moved to Caleb's side, placing a protective arm around his shoulders. "Caleb, honey, Why don't you go back inside? I need to speak with this gentleman." But Marcus was already moving forward, extending his hand to Caleb. "Hello, Caleb. I'm Marcus. I'm your father." The world seemed to tilt on its axis as Caleb looked up at Charlotte. Confusion and hurt etched on his young face. "Mom? What's he talking about?" Before Charlotte could formulate a response, James appeared at the doorway, drawn by the commotion. Despite the early hour, he clutched a glass of whiskey, his appearance disheveled. "What's going on out here?" he demanded, his words slightly slurred. Marcus raised an eyebrow, taking in James's unkempt state. "And who might you be?" Charlotte's new benefactor. James bristled at the insinuation. "I'm James L., and this is my property. Who the hell are you?" "James, please," Charlotte pleaded, trying to defuse the situation. "This is Marcus Reeves. He's Caleb's biological father." A tense silence fell over the group. Caleb looked from Charlotte to Marcus, his young mind struggling to process this revelation. James, for his part, seemed to sober up slightly, sensing the gravity of the situation. Marcus broke the silence, his voice smooth and controlled. "I think it's time we had a serious discussion about Caleb's future, Charlotte. I've recently learned about his musical talent, and I believe I can offer him opportunities that you simply can't." Charlotte's grip on Caleb tightened. "You have no right," she began, but Marcus cut her off. "I have every right," he said, his tone hardening. "I'm his father, and I'm prepared to go to court if necessary. Now think about it, Charlotte. A stable home, the best schools, connections in the music industry. Can you really provide all that for him?" James, who had been watching the exchange with growing anger, suddenly stepped forward. "Now listen here, you pompous ass," he growled, jabbing a finger at Marcus's chest. "You can't just waltz in here and start making demands. Charlotte and Caleb are under my protection, and I've got an army of lawyers who'd be more than happy to bury you in paperwork." Marcus smirked, unfazed by James's threat. "Ah yes, the great James L. I've heard about your recent difficulties. Are you sure you're in any position to be making promises?" The jab hit home, and James faltered, the reality of his precarious situation washing over him. Charlotte, seeing James's hesitation, stepped into the breach. "Marcus," she said, her voice low and determined, "you need to leave. Now! If you want to discuss this, we'll do it through proper channels. But I promise you, I will fight you with everything I have." For a moment it seemed Marcus might argue further, but something in Charlotte's eyes gave him pause. He nodded, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. "Very well. You'll be hearing from my lawyers. And Caleb," he added, looking at the boy, "I look forward to getting to know you." As Marcus drove away, the tension lingered in the air. Caleb turned to Charlotte, his eyes brimming with tears. "Mum, why didn't you tell me? Is he really my dad?" Charlotte knelt down, pulling Caleb into a tight embrace. "Oh, sweetheart, there's so much to explain. Let's go inside, and I'll tell you everything." As they walked back to the house, James watched them go, a strange mix of emotions swirling within him. The threat to Charlotte and Caleb's happiness had stirred something in him, cutting through the fog of alcohol and grief. For the first time in months, he felt a spark of his old fire, a desire to protect and fight. But as he looked down at the glass in his hand, James realized the enormity of the challenge ahead. If he was going to be any help to Charlotte and Caleb, he would need to face his own demons first. The question was, after falling so far, did he have the strength to climb back up? In the weeks following Marcus's unexpected appearance, a palpable tension hung over the mansion. However, amidst the uncertainty, Charlotte and Caleb found solace and purpose in their budding music career. Noah, true to his word, had begun the process of introducing them to the world of professional music. Their first recording session was a mix of nerves and excitement. The state-of-the-art studio, with its gleaming equipment and sound-proofed walls, was a far cry from their humble practice space at home. Caleb's eyes were wide with wonder as he took in the array of instruments and technology surrounding them. "Remember," Charlotte whispered to him as they prepared to record, "it's just you and me playing together like always. The rest is just decoration." Caleb nodded, his small hand squeezing hers before he took his place at the grand piano. As the red light flicked on, signaling the start of the recording, mother and son lost themselves in the music. Noah watched from the control room, a smile playing on his lips. He had known they were talented, but seeing them in a professional setting confirmed his instincts. There was a raw authenticity to their performance that couldn't be manufactured. As the weeks turned into months, Charlotte and Caleb's star began to rise. Their first single, a hauntingly beautiful rendition of the Song of the Soul, gained traction on streaming platforms. Music critics praised the unique blend of Charlotte's mature, emotion-laden vocals with Caleb's pure, pitch-perfect piano accompaniment. Local radio stations picked up their music, and soon interview requests started pouring in. Charlotte, initially hesitant about the publicity, found herself warming to the role of spokesperson for their musical duo. She spoke eloquently about their journey, their love for music, and the importance of nurturing young talent. Caleb, for his part, charmed everyone he met. His natural enthusiasm for music, coupled with his endearing innocence, made him a favorite among interviewers and fans alike. Yet, true to her word, Charlotte ensured that his education and well-being remained the top priority. "We're not going to let this change who we are," she would often remind him. "Music is a gift we share, not a job that defines us." As their popularity grew, so did the demands on their time. Noah, ever the protective mentor, helped them navigate the sometimes treacherous waters of the music industry. He shielded them from exploitative contracts and guided them towards opportunities that aligned with their values. One such opportunity came in the form of a talent show on national television. The producers, having heard Charlotte and Caleb's story, were eager to feature them. After much deliberation and assurances about Caleb's welfare, Charlotte agreed. The night of the performance was electric. As they took the stage, Charlotte felt a moment of panic, the bright lights and sea of faces momentarily overwhelming her. But then she looked down at Caleb, seated at the piano, his face a picture of calm concentration, and her fears melted away. Their performance was nothing short of magical. Charlotte's voice, rich with emotion, soared over Caleb's delicate piano work. The song, an original composition they had worked on together, told the story of their journey of hardship, hope, and the unbreakable bond between them. As the last note faded, there was a moment of hushed silence before the audience erupted into thunderous applause. Tears streamed down Charlotte's face as she hugged Caleb, both of them overwhelmed by the response. The judges were effusive in their praise. "In all my years in this industry," one of them said, his voice thick with emotion, "I've never seen a more genuine, heartfelt performance. You two don't just play music, you live it." Their appearance on the show catapulted Charlotte and Caleb into the national spotlight. Overnight, they became the talk of the music world. Record labels began courting them, offering deals that would have been unimaginable just a year ago. But with the increased attention came new challenges. The pressure to produce, to tour, to be constantly in the public eye began to weigh on them. Charlotte found herself struggling to balance their burgeoning career with her desire to give Caleb a normal childhood. It was during this time that James, who had been a distant figure in the mansion despite their living under the same roof, began to show signs of change. Seeing Charlotte struggle seemed to awaken something in him. One evening, as Charlotte pored over contracts and tour schedules, James approached her. "Oh, you know," he said, his voice gruff but clear, the smell of alcohol noticeably absent, "I used to be pretty good at negotiating deals. If you'd like, I could take a look at those for you." Charlotte looked up, surprised by the offer. It was the most coherent and helpful James had been in months. That would be wonderful, Mr. L, thank you." As James sat down to review the documents, he felt a sense of purpose that had been missing since Hannah's death. And here was something concrete he could do, a way to use his skills to help others rather than destroy himself. With James's business acumen and Noah's industry knowledge, Charlotte and Caleb were able to navigate their newfound success with greater ease. They signed with a respected indie label that allowed them creative control and ensured Caleb's education and well-being were prioritized. Their debut album, released to critical acclaim, was a beautiful tapestry of original compositions and unique covers. It told the story of their journey, from a cramped apartment with a broken keyboard to the grand stages they now commanded. The album's title, Broken Keys and Open Hearts, became a rallying cry for aspiring musicians everywhere. As their fame grew, Charlotte and Caleb used their platform to advocate for music education in underprivileged communities. They established a foundation that provided instruments and lessons to children who couldn't afford them, determined to give others the chance they had been given. Through it all, they remained grounded, never forgetting the struggles that had brought them to this point. Each performance, whether in a sold-out arena or an intimate studio session, was infused with the same passion and authenticity that had first caught Noah's attention. One evening, after a particularly successful concert, Caleb turned to Charlotte backstage, his face serious beyond his years. "Mom," he said, "do you think we're making a difference? Do you think we're using our music the right way?" Charlotte knelt down, looking into her son's eyes. She saw they're not just the talented musician or the rising star, but the kind, thoughtful boy she had raised. With a smile, she pulled him into a hug. "Yes, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice full of pride and love. "We're doing exactly what we're meant to do. We're sharing our gift, and hopefully we're making the world a little bit brighter, one song at a time." As they embraced, the sound of applause still echoing from the auditorium, Charlotte felt a profound sense of gratitude. Their journey had been long and often difficult, but in that moment, surrounded by the music they loved and the people who supported them, she knew that every struggle had been worth it. Despite the glimmer of hope that had appeared in James's life through his involvement with Charlotte and Caleb's career, his years of self-destructive behavior had set in motion a chain of events that could not be easily undone. The empire he had built, once seemingly indestructible, was crumbling around him. One crisp autumn morning, as the leaves outside the mansion turned golden, James received the news he had been dreading but, deep down, expecting. His lawyer, a man who had stood by him through countless triumphs, now sat across from him with a grim expression. "I'm sorry, James," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "We've exhausted all options. The creditors are calling in their loans, and the board has voted to remove you as CEO. The company, it's going into receivership." James sat there, stunned into silence. The words washed over him, each one a hammer blow to the fragile sense of purpose he had recently begun to rebuild. He had known things were bad, but this was the end. As the lawyer continued to explain the details, the asset seizures, the legal proceedings, the media statements, James found his mind wandering. And he thought of Hannah, of the life they had built together, of the dreams they had shared. How had it come to this? The following weeks were a blur of legal meetings, press conferences, and painful goodbyes. The mansion, once a symbol of his success, was to be sold to cover debts. Luxury cars were repossessed, artwork auctioned off, and bank accounts frozen. Charlotte and Caleb watched the process with a mix of sadness and concern. Despite James's past behavior, they had grown to care for him, seeing glimpses of the man he used to be, the man he could be again. "Mr. L," Charlotte said gently one evening, finding James staring blankly at the piano where she and Caleb often practiced. "Noah and I have been talking. We'd like to help." James turned to her, his eyes hollow. "Help? Charlotte, there's nothing left to help. It's all gone." Charlotte took a deep breath. "Not everything. Your knowledge, your experience, that's still valuable. And we found an apartment for you. It's small, but it's in a decent neighborhood, close to where we'll be living." James blinked, surprised by the offer. "You don't owe me anything, Charlotte. If anything, I've been a falterer to you and Caleb. You gave us a chance when we needed it most," Charlotte replied firmly. "Let us return the favor." And so on a grey, drizzly morning, James L. found himself standing in a small, one-bedroom apartment in a modest part of town. The space was a far cry from the sprawling mansion he had called home for so long. A single suitcase containing what remained of his possessions sat by the door. As he looked around the sparse room, reality began to sink in. This was his life now. No staff, no luxury, no buffer between him and the harsh realities he had so long avoided. The first few days were the hardest. James, used to having everything done for him, struggled with the most basic tasks. Cooking meals, doing laundry, even making his bed, Each core was a stark reminder of how far he had fallen. Nights were the worst. In the quiet darkness of the small apartment, with no distractions to dull his thoughts, James was forced to confront the choices that had led him here. The drinking, the reckless spending, the pushing away of those who cared about him, it all played out in his mind like a torturous film reel. Yet, as days turned into weeks, something unexpected began to happen. The fog of alcohol, which had clouded his mind for so long, started to lift. But without access to his former wealth, James found himself forced into sobriety. The withdrawal was brutal, but with each passing day, his thoughts became clearer. He began to take walks in the local park, observing the simple pleasures of everyday life that he had long ignored. The laughter of children playing, the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze, the warm smile of a stranger passing by, these small moments started to fill the void that he had once tried to drown with wealth and alcohol. One morning, as he sipped a cup of coffee he had made himself, James caught his reflection in the small mirror above the kitchen sink. The face that looked back at him was older, warier, but there was something else there too, a clarity in his eyes that had been missing for years. For the first time in a long while, James felt a flicker of hope. Rock bottom, he realized, could be a foundation, and from here the only way was up. As autumn gave way to winter, James found himself approaching another birthday. Unlike the lavish celebrations of years past, this one promised to be a solitary affair in his modest apartment. The date, once a reminder of his success and influence, now loomed as a stark milestone of his fall from grace. On the morning of his birthday, James awoke to an unfamiliar silence. No staff bustling about, no phone ringing with well wishes from sycophantic acquaintances. Just the soft ticking of a clock and the muffled sounds of the city outside his window. He went through his now familiar morning routine, making his bed, brewing a pot of coffee, and sitting by the small window to watch the world go by. As he sipped his coffee, James reflected on the past year, the loss of his fortune, the humiliation of his public downfall, the struggle with sobriety. It had been the most challenging year of his life. A knock at the door startled him from his reverie. Opening it, he found Charlotte standing there, a small, wrapped package in her hands, and a warm smile on her face. "Happy birthday, Mr. L," she said softly. James blinked, surprised not just by her presence, but by the fact that she had remembered. "Charlotte, I thank you. Please come in." As Charlotte entered the apartment, James felt a twinge of embarrassment at the modest surroundings. But if Charlotte noticed, she gave no indication. Instead, she handed him the package. "It's not much," she said, "but Caleb and I wanted you to have something special today." James carefully unwrapped the gift, revealing a framed photograph. It was a candid shot from months ago, capturing a moment he had almost forgotten. In the picture, James sat at the piano with Caleb, both of them laughing as James attempted to play a simple tune. Charlotte stood nearby, her face alight with amusement and warmth. I don't know what to say," James murmured, his fingers tracing the frame. Charlotte's smile deepened. "There's something else," she said, reaching into her purse and pulling out an envelope. "An invitation, actually." James opened the envelope to find a ticket to a concert. Charlotte and Caleb's concert, to be held that very evening at one of the city's most prestigious venues. "We'd be honored if you'd come," Charlotte said. "It's our first major headlining show, and well, we wouldn't be here without you, Mr. L." James felt a lump form in his throat. After everything that had happened, after how he had behaved, they still wanted him there. "Charlotte, I don't deserve this kindness," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Charlotte reached out, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "Mr. L, everyone deserves a second chance. You gave us ours when you invited us to your party that night. Let us return the favor." As Charlotte prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "The concert starts at 8, but there's a small gathering beforehand for family and close friends. We'd love for you to join us there too, if you feel up to it." After she left, James stood in the middle of his small apartment, the ticket clutched in his hand. The idea of attending the concert filled him with a mix of emotions: pride for Charlotte and Caleb's success, gratitude for their kindness, and anxiety about facing the world he had left behind. For a moment he was tempted to decline, to stay in the safety of his apartment. But as he looked at the photograph again, at the joy captured in that fleeting moment, James felt something stir within him, a desire to reconnect, to be part of something meaningful again. With a deep breath, James made his decision. He would go to the concert. It was time to stop hiding, time to face the music, both figuratively and literally. As he began to prepare for the evening, James felt, for the first time in a long while, a sense of anticipation for what the future might hold. As evening fell, James stood before the small mirror in his apartment, adjusting his tie with trembling hands. The suit he wore, once one of many in his extensive wardrobe, was now his only remaining piece of fine clothing. It hung a little loose on his frame, a testament to the changes he'd undergone in recent months. With a deep breath, James stepped out into the cool night air. The walk to the concert hall, a journey he would have once made in a chauffeured limousine, now served as a moment of reflection. Each step seemed to echo with memories of his past life, yet also pulsed with the nervous energy of new beginnings. Approaching the venue, James felt his heart rate quicken. The marquee blazed with Charlotte and Caleb's names, and a line of excited concert-goers stretched around the block. For a moment he hesitated, the urge to turn back nearly overwhelming him. But the weight of the ticket in his pocket, a tangible reminder of Charlotte's kindness, urged him forward. At the VIP entrance, James gave his name to the attendant, half expecting to be turned away. Instead, he was ushered into a warmly lit reception area where a small group of people mingled. Noah, deep in conversation with what appeared to be music industry executives, caught sight of James and excused himself. Noah greeted him warmly, clasping his hand. "I'm so glad you could make it. Charlotte and Caleb will be thrilled." Before James could respond, a small whirlwind of energy burst into the room. "Mr. L," Caleb exclaimed, rushing over to hug him. "You came." James, momentarily stunned by the boy's enthusiastic greeting, awkwardly patted Caleb's back. "Of course I came," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." Charlotte appeared behind her son, radiant in a simple yet elegant gown. "Mr. L," she said softly, her eyes shining with genuine warmth. "Thank you for being here. It means so much to us." As they chatted, James felt a strange sensation wash over him. Here, among people who had every reason to shun him, he was being welcomed with open arms. The realization brought a lump to his throat. Soon it was time for Charlotte and Caleb to prepare for their performance. As they said their goodbyes, Caleb buys decals with a serious expression. "We're going to play the Song of the Soul tonight, Mr. L, for you and for Mrs. Hannah." James felt as if the wind had been knocked out of him. He managed a nod, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in his chest. Taking his seat in the auditorium, James found himself surrounded by an expectant crowd. The energy in the room was palpable, a buzz of excitement that he once would have taken for granted, but now found almost overwhelming. As the lights dimmed and Charlotte and Caleb took the stage, a hush fell over the audience. The first notes of their opening song filled the air, and James felt himself transported. Charlotte's voice, rich and emotive, blended seamlessly with Caleb's skillful piano playing. Together they wove a musical tapestry that spoke of struggle, hope, and the unbreakable bonds of love. As the concert progressed, James found himself on an emotional roller coaster. Each song seemed to touch a different part of his soul, awakening feelings he had long suppressed. He laughed, he cried, he sat in awe of the incredible talent before him. Then came the moment Caleb had mentioned. The familiar opening notes of the Song of the Soul echoed through the hall, and James felt his heart constrict. Memories of Hannah flooded his mind. Their first dance, quiet evenings by the piano, the last time he had heard her play this very song. But as Charlotte's voice joined Caleb's playing, something shifted within James. The pain of loss was still there, but it was joined by something else, a bittersweet gratitude for the love he had known, and a dawning realization that perhaps, just perhaps, he could honor Hannah's memory not through self-destruction, but by embracing life once more. Tears streamed down James's face, unchecked and unnoticed. Around him, the audience sat spellbound, many openly weeping at the raw emotion pouring from the stage. In that moment, James felt more connected to his fellow human beings than he had in years. As the final notes faded away, there was a beat of silence before the auditorium erupted in thunderous applause. James found himself on his feet, clapping until his hands hurt, his heart so full it felt it might burst. When Charlotte and Caleb took their final bow, their eyes sought out James in the crowd. The smile they shared was one of triumph, of shared understanding, of a journey that had brought them all to this incredible moment. As the crowd began to disperse, James remained in his seat, overwhelmed by the experience. Noah appeared beside him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You okay, old friend?" he asked softly. James looked up, his eyes red-rimmed but clear. "No," he said honestly. "But I think I might be someday." As he finally rose to leave, James felt as though a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The music had stirred something within him, awakening a part of his soul he thought long dead. For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope for the future, a desire to make amends, to live again. Walking out into the night air, James took a deep breath. The city around him seemed different somehow, full of possibility. He knew the road ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to face it. The concert had been more than just a performance, it had been a turning point, a chance at redemption, and James was determined not to waste it. The days following the concert were a whirlwind of emotion and introspection for James. The music had awakened something in him, stirring feelings and memories he had long suppressed. As he sat in his small apartment, the melody of the Song of the Soul still echoing in his mind, James knew he had reached a crossroads. One morning, about a week after the concert, James found himself staring at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. The face that looked back at him was a far cry from the confident, successful businessman he had once been. But for the first time in years, he didn't flinch away from his own gaze. Instead, he leaned in closer, studying the lines etched by grief and self-destruction, the eyes that had seen both triumph and devastating loss. "Enough," he said aloud, his voice firm. "It's time to change." In a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years, James began to take stock of his life, and he pulled out a notebook and started writing, pouring out his thoughts, regrets, and hopes onto the pages. As he wrote, a plan began to form. First on his list was his sobriety. James realized that his journey to recovery had been haphazard at best, driven more by circumstance than genuine commitment. Yet he made a decision then and there to fully embrace sobriety, to face his addiction head-on. With trembling hands, he picked up his phone and dialed a number he had long ignored. "Hello," he said when the line connected. "My name is James, and I need help. I'd like to attend a meeting." The next day, James found himself in a community center basement, surrounded by strangers who shared his struggle. As he listened to their stories, he felt a sense of kinship he hadn't experienced in years. When it came his turn to speak, James surprised himself with his honesty. "I've lost everything," he admitted, his voice shaky but determined. "My wife, my fortune, my self-respect. But sitting at that concert, hearing that music, I realized I haven't lost the ability to change, to try again." The supportive nods and murmurs of understanding from the group gave James a strength he hadn't known he needed. He left the meeting with a sponsor's number in his pocket and a renewed commitment to his recovery. Next, James turned his attention to his financial situation. While most of his assets were gone, he still possessed a wealth of knowledge and experience. He reached out to Noah, swallowing his pride to ask for guidance. "I need to work, Noah," he said during their meeting. "Not for the money, but for the purpose. I've made so many mistakes, I want to use what I know to help others avoid the same pitfalls." Noah, seeing the sincerity in his old friend's eyes, nodded thoughtfully. "You know," he said, "I've been thinking of starting a mentorship program for young entrepreneurs. Your experience, both the successes and the failures, could be invaluable. Are you interested?" James felt a spark of excitement, a feeling he hadn't experienced in relation to work in a long time. "Yes," he said firmly, "I'd like that very much." As the weeks passed, James threw himself into his new roles with a vigor that surprised even him. He attended meetings regularly, working through the steps with a dedication born of hard-learned lessons. The mentorship program with Noah took off, and James found himself energized by the young, eager minds he encountered. Sharing his knowledge, helping others navigate the pitfalls of business and life, gave him a sense of purpose he had been lacking. But perhaps the most significant change came in James's personal relationships. He began to reach out to those he had pushed away during his downward spiral. Some were hesitant, the wounds still fresh. Others, like Noah, welcomed him back with open arms. Each conversation, each tentative step towards rebuilding burnt bridges was both painful and healing. One sunny afternoon, James found himself back at the mansion, now alive with the sound of music as Charlotte and Caleb practiced for their next performance. As he listened to them play, a bittersweet smile crossed his face. He thought of Hannah, of the life they had shared in this very house. But for the first time, the memory didn't send him reaching for a drink. Instead, it filled him with a quiet gratitude for the love they had shared and the lessons he had learned. "Mr. L?" Caleb's voice broke through his reverie. "Would you like to join us? Mom's teaching me a new piece." James looked at Charlotte, who nodded encouragingly. "I'd love to," he said, moving towards the piano. As he sat down beside Caleb, James felt a sense of peace wash over him. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, temptations, and moments of doubt. But as his fingers touched the keys, joining in the melody that Caleb and Charlotte were creating, James knew that he was exactly where he needed to be. He was on a new path, one of redemption, growth, and hope. And this time he was determined to see it through to the end. As Charlotte's and Caleb's musical career continued to flourish, life seemed to be on an upward trajectory. Their latest album was receiving critical acclaim, and they were preparing for their first international tour. The future looked bright, filled with promise and opportunity. However, fate had a cruel twist in store, one that would test Charlotte's strength and resolve like never before. It started with subtle symptoms, unexplained fatigue, occasional dizzy spells, and a persistent cough that she attributed to the rigorous rehearsal schedule. Charlotte, ever the devoted mother and performer, pushed through, determined not to let anything interfere with their hard-earned success. One morning, as she was helping Caleb prepare for school, a wave of dizziness hit her so strongly that she had to grip the kitchen counter to stay upright. Caleb, with the perceptiveness of a child who had grown up faster than his years, noticed immediately. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, his young face creased with worry. Charlotte forced a smile, straightening up with effort. "I'm fine, sweetie, just a little tired from all the excitement. Now, did you pack your music sheets for your lesson today?" As Caleb headed off to school, Charlotte made a decision. She would see a doctor, if only to put her mind at ease and ensure she was in top form for their upcoming tour. The visit to the doctor turned into a series of tests, each more concerning than the last. Blood work, scans, and specialists all pointed to a diagnosis that Charlotte had never imagined she would face: a rare, aggressive form of cancer. The oncologist's words seemed to echo in the sterile examination room. "Ms. Davies, I'm afraid the prognosis is challenging. With immediate and aggressive treatment, we may be able to extend your life by several months, possibly a year or two. But I must be clear, this is a terminal diagnosis." Charlotte sat there, numb with shock. Her mind raced, not with thoughts of her own mortality, but with concerns for Caleb. What would happen to him? How could she leave him alone in this world? As she left the hospital, Charlotte made a decision that would shape the coming months. She would fight this illness with everything she had, but she would do it silently. Caleb, their music, their dream, none of it would be tainted by the shadow of her illness. "I need you to keep this confidential," she told her doctor, her voice steady, despite the turmoil within. "My son, he can't know." "Not yet. We have a tour coming up, a chance to share our music with the world. I won't take that away from him." The doctor looked concerned but nodded, respecting her wishes while outlining a treatment plan that could be managed discreetly. In the weeks that followed, Charlotte became an expert at hiding her pain. She scheduled chemotherapy sessions during Caleb's school hours, explaining her occasional absences as meetings with producers or vocal training. The side effects of the treatment, the nausea, the fatigue, the hair loss, she disguised with a mixture of sheer will and clever subterfuge. On stage, Charlotte was radiant as ever. If her voice occasionally wavered, critics praised it as a new depth of emotion in her performance. What the audience didn't see were the moments backstage when she would collapse into a chair, exhausted and in pain, only to rally her strength and return to the spotlight with a dazzling smile. Noah, ever perceptive, began to suspect that something was amiss. He noticed the subtle changes, the weight loss Charlotte tried to hide with flowing costumes, the makeup that couldn't quite conceal the pallor of her skin. Charlotte, he approached her one day after a particularly grueling rehearsal. "Is everything all right? You seem different lately." Charlotte felt a moment of panic, but years of keeping her emotions in check allowed her to maintain her composure. "I'm fine, Noah, just a bit tired with all the preparations. You know how it is." Noah didn't seem entirely convinced, but he nodded, respecting her privacy. "You know you can always talk to me, right? About anything." Charlotte felt a lump in her throat, touched by his concern and tempted, for a moment, to unburden herself. But the image of Caleb, happy and untroubled, steeled her resolve. "I know, Noah, thank you." As the tour approached, Charlotte's condition worsened. The treatments, while keeping the cancer at bay, took a heavy toll on her body. There were mornings when getting out of bed seemed an insurmountable task. But each time she saw Caleb's excited face as he talked about the upcoming concerts, she found the strength to push through. One evening, as she tucked Caleb into bed, he looked up at her with those innocent eyes that could see right through her. "Mom, are you sure you're okay? You look sad sometimes when you think I'm not looking." Charlotte felt her heart breaking, but she managed a warm smile. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm not sad. How could I be? I'm living our dream, making music with you. Sometimes I'm just overwhelmed by how lucky we are." She hugged him tightly, allowing herself a moment of vulnerability hidden from his view. "I love you so much, Caleb. Never forget that." As the first date of the tour loomed closer, Charlotte found herself spending more time at the piano when Caleb was at school. She played their songs, her fingers dancing over the keys as tears streamed down her face. In these private moments, she allowed herself to grieve for the future she might not see, for the milestones in Caleb's life she might miss. But she also played with a fierce determination. Each note was a defiance against her illness, a promise to leave behind a legacy of music that would live on long after she was gone. She poured every ounce of her love, her hopes, and her dreams into the music, creating new arrangements that she would surprise Caleb with during their tour. On the night before they were set to leave, Charlotte stood in the doorway of Caleb's room, watching him sleep. The moonlight cast a soft glow on his peaceful face, and Charlotte felt a surge of love so strong it nearly brought her to her knees. "I'll find a way to stay with you, my love," she whispered. "Through our music, through the lessons I've taught you. I promise you'll never be alone." With that vow, Charlotte turned away, wiping her eyes and squaring her shoulders. Tomorrow, they would step onto a world stage, and she would be damned if she let anything, even a terminal illness, dim the light of their shared dream. The show would go on, and Charlotte would make sure it was the performance of a lifetime, for Caleb, for their fans, and for the legacy she was determined to leave behind. The international tour was in full swing, and Charlotte and Caleb were riding high on the wave of their success. Despite her hidden battle with illness, Charlotte managed to pour every ounce of her strength and passion into their performances. Caleb, blissfully unaware of his mother's condition, was thriving in the spotlight, his talent and charm winning hearts across the globe. It was during their stop in London, just before a sold-out show at the Royal Albert Hall, that tragedy struck. The day had started like any other on tour, early morning rehearsals, sound checks and interviews. Caleb, excited by the historic venue, had been practicing relentlessly, determined to give the performance of his young life. As they were leaving the final rehearsal, Caleb, caught up in his excitement, raced ahead of Charlotte in the crowded backstage area. "Caleb, slow down. Charlotte called out, her maternal instincts heightened by her weakened state. But her warning came too late. Caleb, not seeing a stack of equipment cases in his path, tripped and fell hard. The sickening crack that echoed through the corridor was followed by Caleb's agonized cry. Charlotte's world seemed to stop as she rushed to her son's side. Caleb was clutching his right hand, his face contorted in pain. Even before the medics arrived, Charlotte knew in her heart that this was serious. The next few hours passed in a blur of hospital corridors, X-rays, and hushed conversations with doctors. The diagnosis was devastating: multiple fractures in Caleb's right hand, including severe damage to the delicate bones of his fingers. "He'll need surgery," the doctor explained gently, "and extensive rehabilitation. I must warn you, there's a significant risk that he may never regain the full dexterity needed for professional piano playing." Charlotte felt as if the ground had opened up beneath her feet. This was Caleb's passion, his gift. The thought of him losing it was almost too much to bear, especially in light of her own uncertain future. Caleb, groggy from pain medication, looked up at his mother with tear-filled eyes. "Mom," he whispered, his voice trembling, "will I be able to play again?" Charlotte swallowed hard, forcing back her own tears. "Oh, sweetie," she said, stroking his hair, "we're going to do everything we can. You're strong and you're a fighter. We'll get through this together." As Caleb drifted off to sleep, Charlotte stepped out of the hospital room, finally allowing her composure to crumble. She sobbed silently, the weight of her illness and now Caleb's injury threatening to crush her. Noah, who had flown in as soon as he heard the news, found her there. Without a word, he enveloped her in a comforting embrace. "He's young," Noah said softly, "and medicine has come a long way. We'll get him the best care possible." Charlotte nodded, grateful for Noah's support but unable to shake the fear that gripped her heart. How could she leave Caleb now, when he needed her most? The cruel irony of the situation wasn't lost on her. Just as her own body was failing her, Caleb faced a battle to regain the use of his hands. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of surgeries, specialist consultations, and the beginning of a grueling rehabilitation process. The tour was indefinitely postponed, and Charlotte threw herself into Caleb's recovery with a fervor that surprised even her doctors. She researched tirelessly, seeking out the most innovative therapies and treatments. When Caleb's spirits flagged, she was there with encouragement and love. And through it all, she continued to hide her own deteriorating health, pushing herself to the brink of collapse for the sake of her son. One afternoon, as Caleb sat frustrated after a particularly difficult therapy session, he looked up at Charlotte with a maturity beyond his years. "Mom," he said quietly, "what if I can't play again? What if I'm letting you down?" Charlotte felt her heart break at his words. She knelt beside him, taking his uninjured hand in hers. "Caleb, listen to me," she said, her voice filled with fierce love. "You could never let me down. Our music, our performances, they're wonderful, but they're not what's most important. What matters is you, your happiness, your health. We'll face whatever comes together." As she spoke, Charlotte made a silent vow. No matter what happened with her own health, she would see Caleb through this. She would make sure he had the strength and support to overcome this challenge, even if it meant pushing her own treatment to the limit. That night, after Caleb had fallen asleep, Charlotte sat at the small keyboard they had brought to the hospital room. Her fingers, still strong despite her illness, moved over the keys, playing a soft, haunting melody. It was a new composition, born from the pain and hope of their current situation. And as she played, Charlotte allowed herself to imagine a future she might not see: Caleb grown and strong, his hands healed, playing this very melody to an adoring audience. She poured all her love, her fears, and her dreams into the music, creating a legacy that would live on long after her. The road ahead would be long and difficult, filled with uncertainties and challenges. But as the last notes of her new song faded away, Charlotte felt a renewed sense of determination. They had overcome so much already. This too they would face together with the same courage and passion that had brought their music to the world. James had been following Charlotte and Caleb's tour with keen interest, marveling at their success and feeling a sense of pride in the small role he had played in their journey. When news of Caleb's accident reached him, he felt a familiar pang of helplessness, reminiscent of the days when he could do nothing to save Hannah. But James was not the same man he had been then. His journey of recovery and redemption had taught him the value of action, of using his resources and knowledge for good. Without hesitation, he reached out to Noah. "What can I do?" James asked, his voice filled with determination. "There must be something." Noah, surprised but touched by James's offer, explained the situation. "The medical bills are mounting, and the best specialists are expensive. Charlotte's putting on a brave face, but I can tell she's worried about more than just Caleb's recovery." James nodded, a plan already forming in his mind. "Leave it to me," he said. "I may not have my fortune anymore, but I still have connections, and it's time I used them for something worthwhile." Over the next few weeks, James worked tirelessly behind the scenes. He reached out to old business contacts, calling in favors and leveraging his remaining influence. His first priority was ensuring Caleb received the best possible care. Through a series of discreet arrangements, James managed to secure appointments with world-renowned hand specialists and innovative therapists. He made sure these experts' fees were mysteriously taken care of, allowing Charlotte to focus solely on Caleb's recovery without the added stress of financial burden. But James didn't stop there. He remembered the joy music had brought to Hannah and how it had been a lifeline for him in his darkest days. He couldn't bear the thought of Caleb losing his ability to play. Working with Noah, James quietly funded research into cutting-edge therapies and technologies designed to help musicians recover from hand injuries. He sponsored a grant for a promising young researcher working on a revolutionary type of hand brace that could aid in Caleb's rehabilitation. All of this was done anonymously. James was adamant that Charlotte and Caleb shouldn't know the source of this help. "They've given me so much already," he told Noah. "This is the least I can do to repay that kindness." As Caleb's treatment progressed, small miracles seemed to occur. A cancellation would suddenly open up an appointment with a sought-after specialist. A new experimental therapy would become available just when it was needed most. To Charlotte, it seemed as if the universe was conspiring to help her son. James kept a close eye on Caleb's progress, his heart swelling with each positive report. But he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more going on than just Caleb's injury. Charlotte's fatigue, which he attributed to the stress of Caleb's situation, struck a chord with James. It reminded him too much of Hannah's early symptoms. Concerned, James discreetly arranged for Charlotte to receive a compromise advisory under the guise of a routine examination required by their insurance. When the results came back, confirming his worst fears, James felt a familiar sense of despair threatening to overwhelm him. But this time, instead of turning to alcohol or self-destruction, James channeled his emotions into action. He doubled his efforts, not only supporting Caleb's recovery, but also ensuring that Charlotte received the best possible treatment for her condition. Through carefully orchestrated coincidences, Charlotte found herself consulting with top oncologists, gaining access to experimental treatments that offered hope where standard protocols fell short. James made sure that every resource was at her disposal, all while remaining in the shadows. One day, as James sat in on one of Noah's mentoring sessions with young entrepreneurs, he overheard a discussion about music therapy and its potential in rehabilitation. An idea struck him, and he quickly pulled Noah aside. "What if we could combine Caleb's therapy with his love for music?" James suggested. "Not just playing, but composing, using technology to bridge the gap while his hand heals?" Noah's eyes lit up at the idea. Within days, a state-of-the-art music production setup appeared in Caleb's hospital room, complete with software that could translate his musical ideas into compositions without the need for physical playing. As reports came back of Caleb's excitement over this new approach to his therapy, James felt a warmth he hadn't experienced in years. He was making a difference, not through grand gestures or public philanthropy, but through small, meaningful actions that were changing lives. In his small apartment, James looked at the photo Charlotte had given him on his birthday, the one of him Charlotte and Caleb at the piano. He smiled, feeling a sense of purpose and connection he had thought lost forever. "I promise you, Hannah," he whispered to the empty room, "I'll do everything I can to help them. This time I won't fail." As he turned out the light that night, James felt a peace he hadn't known in years. He was no longer the man who had everything and lost it all. He was becoming someone new, someone who understood the true value of giving, of using his skills and resources to lift others up. And in doing so, he was finally beginning to heal himself. In the midst of Caleb's recovery and Charlotte's secret battle with illness, an unexpected opportunity arose that would not only impact their lives but potentially change the landscape of music education across the country. It began with a chance encounter between Noah and a prominent education policy advocate at a charity event. The advocate, impressed by Charlotte and Caleb's story and their dedication to music, suggested that their experience could be a powerful catalyst for change in music education policy. Noah, seeing the potential for a broader impact, brought the idea to Charlotte. "Think about it," Noah said, his eyes alight with excitement. "Your journey from practicing on a broken keyboard to performing on international stages, it's more than just an inspiring story. It's a testament to the power of music education and the need for equal access to it." Charlotte, despite her health struggles, felt a spark of passion ignite within her. She thought of all the children like Caleb, brimming with talent, but lacking the resources to nurture it. "You're right," she said, her voice gaining strength. "We have to do something. But how?" This is where James's expertise came into play. Though still working behind the scenes, he offered invaluable guidance through Noah on how to navigate the complex world of policy and advocacy. Drawing on his years of experience in corporate negotiations and public relations, James helped craft a strategy that would bring their message to the forefront of public discourse. The campaign, titled Harmony for All, was launched with a series of public appearances and interviews featuring Charlotte and Caleb. They shared their story, emphasizing how access to music education had transformed their lives. Caleb, his hands still in recovery, spoke passionately about the therapeutic power of music and the importance of creative expression for young people. Charlotte, pushing through her fatigue, became a powerful spokesperson for the cause. She articulated the need for increased funding for music programs in schools, particularly in underprivileged areas. Her eloquence and sincerity resonated with audiences across the country. James, working tirelessly behind the scenes, helped organize a benefit concert that brought together some of the biggest names in the music industry. The event not only raised substantial funds for music education initiatives, but also attracted the attention of key policymakers. As the campaign gained momentum, Charlotte and Caleb were invited to testify before a congressional committee on education. It was a grueling day for Charlotte, who had to muster every ounce of her strength to appear strong and healthy. But as she spoke, her passion overshadowed her physical discomfort. "Music is not a luxury," she told the committee, her voice clear and compelling. "Every child deserves the opportunity to discover and nurture their musical talents, regardless of their economic background." Caleb, sitting beside his mother, added his own heartfelt plea. "Music saved me," he said simply. "It gave me hope when things were tough. Every kid should have that chance." The committee members were visibly moved. Pictures of Charlotte and Caleb testifying were splashed across newspapers and social media, bringing unprecedented attention to the issue of music education. In the weeks that followed, there was a noticeable shift in the national conversation around arts education. School boards across the country began re-evaluating their music programs. Donations poured in from individuals and corporations alike, inspired by Charlotte and Caleb's story. James, watching from afar, felt a sense of pride and purpose he hadn't experienced in years. He saw how his behind-the-scenes work was contributing to something truly meaningful, something that would outlast him and touch countless lives. The campaign's crowning achievement came when a bill was introduced in Congress to significantly increase funding for music education in public schools. It wasn't a complete victory. The political process was slow and full of compromises, but it was a crucial first step. As Charlotte and Caleb stood in the gallery, watching the bill being debated on the Senate floor, they felt a sense of awe at how far they had come. From a small apartment with a broken keyboard to the halls of Congress, their music had taken them on an incredible journey. "We did it, Mom," Caleb whispered, squeezing Charlotte's hand. Charlotte smiled, fighting back tears of joy and the ever-present pain of her illness. "No, sweetheart," she replied softly. "We're just getting started. This is your legacy, Caleb. Long after the applause fades, this is how our music will live on." As they left the Capitol that day, both Charlotte and Caleb felt a renewed sense of purpose. Their campaign had become about something much bigger than themselves. It was about ensuring that the transformative power of music would be accessible to generations of children to come. And in that mission, they had found a harmony more beautiful than any they had ever performed on stage. On a crisp autumn evening, as the leaves in the city park turned golden and red, James found himself sitting on a bench, lost in thought. The past year had been a whirlwind of change and redemption, from his work with Charlotte and Caleb to his behind-the-scenes efforts in the music education campaign. Yet, there was still a piece missing from his life's puzzle: his estranged younger brother, Tommy. As if summoned by his thoughts, a familiar figure appeared on the path before him. James blinked, unsure if his eyes were playing tricks on him. But there was no mistaking the man who stood there, older and warier, but unmistakably Tommy. "James." Tommy's voice was hesitant, a mix of hope and fear. I wasn't sure I'd find you here." James stood slowly, his heart pounding. "Tommy, what are you doing here?" The brothers stood facing each other, years of pain and misunderstanding stretching between them like a chasm. Tommy took a deep breath, his hands fidgeting nervously. "I've been following the news," he said softly. "The music education campaign, the work you've been doing. It reminded me of the brother I used to know, the one who always looked out for me." James felt a lump form in his throat. Memories flooded back, of protecting Tommy from schoolyard bullies, of teaching him to ride a bike, of the pride he felt when Tommy graduated college. And then, the darker memories, the arguments, the disappointment, the final, bitter fight that had torn them apart. "I've changed, Tommy," James said, his voice rough with emotion. "I hit rock bottom, and I found my way back. But I always regretted how things ended between us." Tommy nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "Me too, James. I've been clean for 2 years now. Went through rehab, got my life back on track, and I realized I needed to make amends, to tell you I'm sorry." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with years of unspoken regret and longing. James took a tentative step forward, then another, until he was standing right in front of his younger brother. "I'm sorry too, Tommy," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I should have been there for you. I was so caught up in my own success, my own life, I forgot what really mattered." And then, as if a dam had broken, the brothers embraced. Years of pain and resentment melted away as they held on to each other, both crying unashamedly. As they pulled apart, wiping their eyes and chuckling softly at their emotional display, James felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He hadn't realized how much he had needed this reconciliation until this moment. "Come on," he said, gesturing towards a nearby cafe. "Let's grab a coffee. We have a lot to catch up on." Over steaming cups of coffee, James and Tommy began the process of rebuilding their relationship. They talked for hours, sharing stories of their struggles and triumphs, their failures and redemptions. Tommy spoke of his battle with addiction, of the long, hard road to recovery. James opened up about losing Hannah, his downfall, and his journey back to a life of purpose. As the evening wore on, James found himself telling Tommy about Charlotte and Caleb, about the music that had brought new meaning to his life. "I'd like you to meet them," James said, a smile playing on his lips. "They're performing a benefit concert next week. Would you come?" Tommy's face lit up with a grin that reminded James of their childhood. "I wouldn't miss it for the world, big brother." As they left the cafe, walking side by side in the cool night air, James felt a sense of completeness he hadn't experienced in years. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, there were still hurts to heal, trust to rebuild. But for the first time in a long time, James felt truly hopeful about the future. With Tommy by his side and the family he had found in Charlotte and Caleb, James realized that he was no longer alone. He was part of something bigger, a tapestry of relationships woven together by love, forgiveness, and the healing power of music. The night of the benefit concert arrived, filled with anticipation and a sense of culmination. The grand hall was packed with an eclectic mix of people: music industry professionals, policymakers, students, and families, all brought together by the power of Charlotte and Caleb's story and the promise of an unforgettable performance. James and Tommy arrived early, taking their seats in the front row. James couldn't help but feel a surge of pride as he looked around at the crowd, knowing the part he had played in making this moment possible. Tommy, sensing his brother's emotion, placed a supportive hand on his shoulder. "You've done good, James," he said softly. "Really good." As the lights dimmed and the audience fell silent, Charlotte and Caleb took the stage. Charlotte, despite her hidden illness, radiated a quiet strength and grace. Caleb, his hand now healed but forever changed, sat at the piano with a look of determination and joy. They began to play, and the hall was filled with music that spoke of struggle, resilience, and hope. It was a new composition, one that Charlotte and Caleb had written together during Caleb's recovery. Every note seemed to tell their story, the hardships they had faced, the love that had sustained them, and the music that had saved them. As James listened, he felt tears welling up in his eyes. He thought of Hannah, of the music they had shared, and how it had led him to this moment. He thought of his own journey from the depths of despair to this place of purpose and connection. Halfway through the performance, something unexpected happened. Caleb stood up from the piano and, with a smile at his mother, picked up a guitar. A murmur of surprise rippled through the audience. This was not an instrument they had ever seen him play before. Charlotte, her eyes shining with pride, explained to the audience, "During Caleb's recovery, we learned that music is more than just one instrument, one way of playing. It's about adapting, finding new ways to express ourselves." As Caleb began to strum the guitar, his fingers moving in ways that accommodated his changed hand, the audience was mesmerized. The music that flowed from the stage was different from what they had heard before, but no less beautiful. And it was a testament to resilience, to the power of reinvention. James felt Tommy's hand tighten on his shoulder, and he knew his brother understood. They had both found new ways to live, to express themselves, to make amends. As the concert drew to a close, Charlotte stepped forward to address the audience. Her voice, though tired, rang out clear and strong. "Music has the power to heal, to unite, to inspire," she said. "It has carried us through our darkest times and lifted us to heights we never imagined. But music is not just for the gifted few, it's for everyone. That's why we're here tonight, to ensure that every child has the chance to discover the magic of music." The applause that followed was thunderous. As Charlotte and Caleb took their final bow, James saw something in their eyes that moved him deeply, a look of accomplishment, of dreams realized, of battles won. After the concert, backstage was a flurry of activity. James and Tommy made their way through the crowd, finally reaching Charlotte and Caleb. Introductions were made, hugs were exchanged, and for a moment they all stood together, an unlikely family brought together by circumstance and bound by music. "Thank you," Charlotte said to James, her eyes conveying more than words ever could, "for everything." James shook his head, a lump in his throat. "No, thank you. Both of you. You've given me more than you could ever know." As they talked, James noticed Charlotte's fatigue, the way she leaned slightly on Caleb for support. He knew her battle was far from over, but he also saw the strength in her eyes, the determination to face whatever came next. Caleb, his face flushed with excitement, was already talking about new music ideas, his fingers moving as if playing invisible instruments. His passion was infectious, and James found himself swept up in the young boy's enthusiasm for the future. As the night drew to a close, and they all said their goodbyes, James felt a sense of peace wash over him. The road ahead would not be easy for any of them. There would be challenges to face, battles to fight, but they would face them together, bound by the music that had brought them all together. Walking out into the cool night air, James looked up at the stars. For the first time in years, he felt truly alive, truly part of something greater than himself. The music of life, with all its complex harmonies and discordant notes, was playing again. And this time, James was determined to play his part to the fullest. Life's symphony is composed of both harmony and discord. Like James, Charlotte, and Caleb, we all face our own movements of despair and triumph. But remember, even in our darkest moments, when the music seems to have faded, there's always a chance for a new melody to begin. Our past mistakes don't define us, they refine us. James's journey from self-destruction to selfless support shows that it's never too late to change the tune of your life. Our Charlotte's silent battle reminds us that true strength often lies in the quiet notes we play for others, even when our own song is fading. And Caleb, young Caleb, teaches us that adaptability is the key to keeping our music alive. When life changes the instrument, we can learn to play a new one. In the grand orchestra of life, we're all connected. The notes we play affect those around us, creating a beautiful, complex harmony. So play your part with passion, lift others with your melody, and remember, every day is a new chance to create music that touches souls and changes lives. Your song matters, your resilience inspires, your love heals. Keep playing, keep hoping, keep loving. For in the end, it's not about the applause we receive, but the lives we've touched with our music. As we reach the end of this moving tale, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Did Charlotte and Caleb's journey touch your heart? Did James's redemption inspire you? If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment with the number 1. Curious about what might happen next in their lives? Wondering how Charlotte's health battle will unfold, or what new challenges await Caleb in his musical career? If you're eager for a potential part 2, let us know by commenting with the number 2. Your opinions matter to us. If there were aspects of the story you didn't quite agree with or would like to discuss further, please share your thoughts in the comments. We value your insights and feedback as they help us improve and create content that truly speaks to you. Lastly, if you enjoyed this story and would like to support our team in bringing more heartwarming and inspiring tales to life, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support means the world to us and enables us to continue crafting stories that touch hearts and spark imaginations. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. We look forward to hearing from you and hopefully seeing you in our next storytelling adventure.